Hey guys, are you prepared for the coronavirus? Are you? Well, if you're not and you're still looking for some extra tips and support and advice, you come to the right place. Let's have a look at some of the basic things that really we need to start thinking about in your business to try and help you get ready for any potential outbreaks of coronavirus with your staff and in your workplace. So I think the first thing to mention here is a lot of the information that we get. I'm going to put the details of the websites below for you to go and click on yourself so you can have a look into further information there as well. But I just want to go through some really basic housekeeping for you. So the first step really is to make sure that whatever parameters you're putting into place in your workplace, you need to make sure everyone's aware of them. There's no point in getting these things put into place and keeping them all secretive. So we need to make sure that we're raising awareness. So the first step is let's raise some awareness. Got to make sure I'm spelling okay here. With your staff. Okay, raise some awareness with your staff over how you are dealing with the coronavirus, the parameters, the things that you're putting in place in your business right now. The second thing is quite a common theme at the moment in time is, do you hold all of the details to contact your staff? Do you hold their emergency contact details as well? So emergency contact details are like, if you want to get hold of my father because I've fallen down the stairs and broken my neck, here's his number, good luck. So at the end of the day, you want to make sure you hold all of those, and not forgetting GDPR, you need to make sure that all the data you hold is up to date and correct. So the second thing is, let's make sure that we hold up to date details for staff and emergency contacts. So really, really simple things there in the first two. Make sure that you are getting things into place and making sure you can contact everybody that you need to contact should you need to contact them. So the next thing really is you want to make sure, you don't want to go into detail here as to spotting the warning signs of coronavirus infection, but you need to make sure that your managers are aware of what they look like. Bearing in mind, we're not going to go into too much detail on it, it's not too dissimilar from a lot of other kind of cases or colds and flus that people could get, or coughs and diseases and sniffles and now flu, dare I say, that people may have. It could look very similar, but can you spot the warning signs? Can your managers spot the signs early on of potential coronavirus? So are managers aware of warning signs? Ugh. So again, that's another third point you really want your managers to be really thinking about here, is making sure they can help to spot these things when they need to spot them to support your staff. So the next thing really is, as we've all been told, you'll see it on all the campaigns going out by the government, it's been on the news, it's been on this morning, I think, and all sorts of other places with the Prime Minister, where they're talking about washing these things. Keep washing your hands, hot water, sanitizer, doing it for the 20 seconds, singing out the hymn of, happy birthday twice or whatever. It's that kind of crazy stuff we need to be thinking of doing. So are we providing clean places for not just the staff, but your visitors to actually clean and wash their hands? So the fourth issue here is, are you providing clean environment? Oh my God. And so are you providing those clean environments for your staff and visitors? Okay, so those are four that we've got on there already. So the fifth one, Jesus God, I'm losing track already, maybe I'm getting it. So the fifth one is making sure that you've got available hand sanitizers as well, which obviously I think is already pretty much in there, but I think at the moment in time, you might find that those will get sold out. So we want to talk about, maybe having hand sanitizers and tissues available. And the last one, I think, just thinking on the top of my head, I think the last one really you want to have in there is about travel plans. So, are people within your teams looking to travel to affected areas? And should they do so, and should only do so in the case of, really extenuating circumstances? So maybe looking at staff travel. So these are just some of the really basic parameters that you really want to start thinking about having into place as your housekeeping to helping to minimize and reduce the impacts and spread of coronavirus. These details are, like I said, available in the links below. So please go ahead and check those out. I'm going to leave those up there for the rest of the video and go through some of the other parameters of what could happen if the coronavirus hits your staff or your business, and what can you do and what could be the impacts of this. So the first one is quite an obvious one, is sickness absence. So what happens in the case of sickness absence? This just take, for example, one of your members of staff has unfortunately contracted coronavirus or suspected to have contracted coronavirus and then thus goes off sick. Well, this really comes down to the crux of it as to what is within your policies and procedures for managing sickness absence. Do you just pay statutory sick pay, or do you pay what we call as occupational sick pay, which is where, for example, your staff will still get the same amount of pay as they normally would do throughout a certain period of sickness absence, and how far are they along with those? So for you, you really need to start thinking about how impactful that could be. So if you're only doing statutory sick pay, bearing in mind the government released this week that they would allow that to kickstart in from the first date of sickness absence rather than the fourth date. So the first 3 days initially of SSP doesn't attract SSP payments, but they've released that that's going to change at the moment in time. So from day one, they will start paying SSP. So SSP, for you guys, there's a statutory amount of about £94.25 that your staff be entitled to per day for statutory sick pay. And this will apply potentially to some of your workers and to your employees. So you need to really think about this and what the impacts could be. But basically, you would be required to make a payment for their sickness absence if they are calling in sick for whatever reason, which is not unusual to any other period of sickness absence, to be honest, other than the fact if you have the SSP, it starts from day 1 or on day 4. So with that in mind, then, moving on, what happens if somebody has to, or you're sending somebody home from work because you're worried that they could have that? Rather than them going off sick, you're sending them home from work so that they don't spread it, or so that they can obviously put themselves into isolation and obviously recover from whatever it is they've got or suspected to have had. So next, really, after that, is looking at if people aren't going off sick, what happens if you are asking people to go home from work? Well, that comes into a number of different categories. So, for example, if you are sending somebody home because you're concerned or you're worried about the spread, or you're worried that they could have the coronavirus or something similar in those symptoms, and just for good measure you want to pack them off to go home and isolate themselves, then in which case you will probably have to pay those people on their normal full pay. So it wouldn't be sickness absence, it would be full pay because they've been sent home from work to obviously go and rest up and make sure they can recover from whatever it is and go through the insulation period that they have to go through, which is the 14 days. Now, the alternative to that is obviously you can do like flexible working. So if your business allows you to be able to go home and work from a laptop, then you could obviously offer your staff a lot more flexibility to go home and work rather than be in the office and congregate together. The problem with that comes into if that doesn't suit your business. So for example, if you're a restaurant, you can't really get your waiting staff to work from home. It's a long way to walk to get the tables. So at the end of the day, you may want to think about whether sending somebody home on full pay to obviously go home, rest up, and isolate themselves from everybody else. You may need to think about that rather than asking people to obviously take work home. And when you're doing that, obviously it's going to be on pay. So bear that in mind, guys. The other part of this is obviously if you're not sending those people home or they're not off sick, what happens if they need to go home to look after a dependent? So for example, people who are caring for a relative, or those that have young children who are their dependents. So if you need to go home and look after, or your staff need to go home and look after those particular individuals, then it comes into the same framework and the same process as you normally would do. So for example, you get the parental leave that people could go home and look after their children in emergencies. The difference and the key here is for those staff, it doesn't always mean it's paid. Sometimes these things can be taken as unpaid parental leave. You're entitled to it, but it doesn't mean it's paid. So a lot of businesses, you might find, you may be one of them out there, will allow people to go home and care after dependents, but it won't be on paid leave. One of the things I would always say to people is look, at the end of the day, if you're trying to get the most out of your staff and you're trying to keep your working family, I don't think it's a great thing if you're going to be one of those employers that says, in this particular situation, I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to pay you whatsoever. Obviously, there's got to be restrictions around this, but at the end of the day, if they've got no choice but to go home and care for a child, for example, if their school is shut, then you may want to be a little bit more considerate around that. But you can always think about things like, holidays. So if they've got any annual leave entitlement, they may want to take some of that for a period of time. You can balance it out with that and unpaid leave. And they can do it in that particular way. The other thing is obviously if you're asking someone to come into work, there's no risks as you can see it. So you've done your measures that are coming down the screen here. If you've done all of those and there is no issues with them coming into the workplace and you require them to come into the workplace, but they refuse, well, this comes into a completely different area of your policies and procedures, as it were. So you'll be looking more around, well, if you're refusing to come into work, then that potentially falls into a disciplinary issue. And we don't want anybody through this process getting pulled into that. Obviously, they would need to identify these particular reasons why they're refusing to come to work as to where those risks are. But if you've got these other bits and pieces in place, like your housekeeping that we put to the side, then realistically, you should have really strong mechanisms and procedures to help to reduce the impacts of coronavirus, the spread of coronavirus in your business, and absolutely safeguard everybody that's working with you. So therefore, people need to be aware if they do that, there's a risk of disciplinary action that's against them from that point forward. And one of the other things I spoke about, coming back onto the flexible working kind of route and everything else, I think one of the things we need to remember is if you are one of those businesses where you can't take waiting home, or you can't be the chef in your home and get the food sent out the window to the restaurant, a couple of miles down the road, at the end of the day, you may find that if you have to allow so many staff to go, you can't any longer keep the restaurant open. And if you are in a business that's at a similar model to that, then that can be quite impactful. So you may want to look at things like layoffs. Layoffs happen over a short-term period, and obviously they're not things you want to use for a long period of time, because if you do, there are risks that staff could claim that actually they're redundant rather than being laid off. So if they're laid off for 4 consecutive weeks or 6 weeks in a 13-week period, then they could claim that they're actually redundant rather than being laid off. But what a layoff does allow you is to potentially reduce your staffing levels over that period of time, rather than opening up a restaurant and providing a pool service to people coming in, because actually you've got half your staff. Now, the key things around layoffs really come down to what's in your terms and conditions of employment with your staff. So are you allowed within the layoffs to actually reduce down to the statutory layoff pay? Or if you don't have that in there, then you have to pay your pay at the same rate, the basic rate that you would pay your staff ordinarily. Otherwise, if you're looking at the statutory layoff pay, then it works out £29 per day for a 5-day period within a 3-month window. So every 3 months, over 5 days, they can get paid £29 a day. It works out to be a maximum of £145 for that period. So for your staff, it's hugely impactful, because that's probably going to be a significant reduction in their pay for those 5 days that they're not in. And it's not something that really you'd want to do for a long period of time, because it's going to be impactful on the staff morale, and also the business when you come back to reopen. So again, I would say in those situations, come back and think about other steps. These are kind of the emergency trigger points and the other ways you can go, not necessarily the first port of call. So I think obviously think about annual leave, think about unpaid leave, think about if you are asking people to go home as dependents to look after their children or other people that they care for, then think about how you can help and support them through that process, rather than just doing the standard, no pay, unpaid, parental leave, etc., etc. Think about how else you can actually support your staff during these times. I think what you'll find is, in actual fact, although the coronavirus has come along and it's asked these questions, and it's asked questions around SSP and how that's structured, A lot of these things that we're talking about are already and should already be within your terms and conditions and your handbooks. And that brings us on to a whole other window of problems. If you don't have written terms and conditions, if you don't have your standard handbook of policies and procedures, then the minutiae of dealing with this is really going to be coming to the core and the crux that makes this really difficult to progress forward. Because at the end of the day, it's down to interpretation between you and the other party as to what is actually in place. So, for example, if you are doing layoffs and I've got nothing in writing, I could say, well, I don't agree with that. That's not what I had in place. And with nothing in writing, it's hard to dispute that. So, guys, right now, what this really does do, on top of everything else that it's obviously raising the question marks over, is it highlights that necessity to make sure that you've got those statement of particulars in place, or contracts, terms and conditions, and you've also got your suite of policies or your handbook of procedures and policies in place in your business, because you're going to be relying on both of them to manage these issues. If you don't have them, then managing these issues can become much more difficult, drawn out and complicated. So if you're having problems with those bits and pieces, then again, contact us using the link down below. We can help with that. If you're looking for more information as to how you can spot the signs of coronavirus with your staff, again, there's a link below. Please go ahead, click on that and look at how you can spot those warning signs. If you're looking for more information as to how you can help manage in your business issues around coronavirus, so sickness absence, layoffs, if you're looking for information on dependents, parental leave, etc., again, we will link onto the ACAS website for you, and you click on the link below for that too. If you need any other information or support and advice in any particular nuanced cases that you have, again, use the links below to let us know about that, and we can see how we can help and support you. Guys, it's been a pleasure. I hope you found this helpful. If you need any more information from us, then please hit us up, let me know, we'll see how we can help. But in the meantime, remember, there are a few key aspects you need to bear in mind. Is your housekeeping in place? Yes or no? If it's not, put it into place. It's there. Come on, let's get it sorted. Number two, are people going off sick? In which case, what is your sickness processes and procedures around pay? And how are you supporting those people whilst they're off sick? Are they calling the 111 service, etc.? Make sure you're supporting your staff through that. The next thing is obviously if people are using their annual leave or unpaid leave to try and help manage the situation. Are they off caring with their dependents, and how are you facilitating that? If they're not going to get any pay for looking after their dependents, how can you help make that a sweetened deal by allowing them to get something at the end of the day? Although that has a cost implication on you, it will be much better when you reopen back up to normality to keep the staff morale and your business going. Otherwise, you're going to get a stagnated effect after all of this is hit. And also, have you had to consider things like flexible working or layoffs in the worst of instances? Because obviously, when you're losing a couple of staff, that actually, keeping the business open just doesn't remain something that's sustainable to do. And then last but not least, is making sure that we're washing these things. It's all over the show. It's everywhere, guys. 20 seconds, happy birthday twice. Wash them continuously, put it in the tissue and bin it. Guys, it's been a pleasure. Remember, outstaff the competition. Take care. See you later.